Welcome to Behind the Investigation. I'm Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe with Atlanta News First. And joining me also is Rachel Polansky, investigator with ANF and ANF Plus. Good to have you here.
Of course, thank you for having me.
So we're going to be talking about medication mix-ups. Before we watch the story, give us a setup. What are we going to see?
Yeah, so this is something that we all do every day. You go to the pharmacy, pick up a prescription, but imagine this, you're given the wrong medication. So this happened to a Metro Atlanta woman, and in working on this story, we uncovered that it's actually a lot more common than you might think. Let's take a look.
I'm frustrated, I'm upset, I'm in pain.
A plea for help from an Atlanta woman with nowhere to turn.
The pain is outrageous. It is extremely bad.
After a bad ankle sprain, Gradine Hector Faison was prescribed oxycodone. Without thinking twice, she picked up the medication from her local CVS and began taking it.
It didn't ease the pain up, but I was wide woke. I waited a couple hours, about 6 hours went by. I took another one, trying to ease the pain again, and it never eased up.
After taking the medication without any pain relief, Hector Faison called her daughter-in-law, who stopped by and paused after seeing the orange pills.
She looked it up. She said, "How many of these you took?" I said, "I done took 4. She said, "Well, don't take no more." That's why she said, "This is Adderall."
While oxycodone is an opioid, often categorized as a downer, Adderall is an amphetamine, often categorized as an upper, and both are Schedule II drugs. Hector Faison immediately called CVS, but she says she got the runaround from her local pharmacy and from the corporate office.
I just want what belongs to me. I want to ease my pain up. I want CVS to make it right. I want them to apologize for giving me the wrong medicine.
An Atlanta News First investigation uncovered what happened to Hector Faison is not uncommon. In fact, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration receives roughly 100,000 medication error reports every year. And get this, medication errors reported to the FDA jumped from 16,000 in 2010 to more than 100,000 in 2018. And these reports are voluntarily submitted, which means the numbers are likely higher.
As far as what's reported to the FDA, usually only accounts for about maybe 1 to 10% of what actually occurs.
Dr. Randall Tackett is a professor at University of Georgia's College of Pharmacy, and he attributes most medication mix-ups to pharmacists' workload.
Hey, Doc, how are you?
Just because you see a number of people behind the pharmacy counter does not mean they're all pharmacists. Most are technicians or support staff who cannot do everything a pharmacist can do.
Those pharmacists have to oversee all of those other people. That pharmacist has to answer questions from the patient. That pharmacist may have to be on the phone with the doctor. And that puts a lot of burden on the pharmacist.
In an effort to minimize mix-ups, some states have limited the number of prescriptions a pharmacist can fill to 150 per shift. While Georgia does not currently have limits, Tackett doesn't know if that's the magic answer.
In theory, possibly, but the reality of that is so hard to enforce. You don't want a pharmacist to like, okay, I've met my quota and I can't fill it.
His best advice for patients is simple: speak up.
If there's any differentiation between what you think you should be getting, question the pharmacist.
As for Gradine Hector Faison,
I'm on the road to recovery.
Her wait is finally over. Atlanta News First Investigates emailed CVS on a Friday. By Monday, Hector Faison received her correct medication and an apology.
I feel like if it wasn't for y'all, I wouldn't have gotten nothing resolved. Nothing at all.
Today, she says she's feeling better.
I'm just going day by day. At this point, I'm in the healing process.
Still, she does not want this to happen to anyone else.
There could have been life and death consequences.
That's why she's urging pharmacists to double check every prescription they fill.
Do not give them the wrong medicine. Other things could happen worse than what it did to me. So please, be careful what you do.
And CVS went on to say that they're looking into how this medication mix-up happened in the first place to ensure that it doesn't happen again, adding prescription errors are a very rare occurrence. But if one does happen, we do everything we can to learn from it in order to continuously improve quality and patient safety, end quote.
And we're back now. Rachel, what are some of the big takeaways from your story?
Right, so this is, again, something we can all do before you leave the pharmacy. Look at the medication. If something doesn't look right to you, if maybe it's not the right color that you're used to, talk to the pharmacist. That's what they're there for. And if possible, try and go to the same pharmacy, because then they'll have all your medications on file and possible drug interactions as well.
I see. So I've done this before where I've gotten some pills and then they look different than the last time. That doesn't mean they're necessarily the wrong medication. They might be using a generic or a different brand of the same kind of medication, right?
Exactly. So when I was talking with the UGA professor, I actually brought that up because I said, oxycodone, shouldn't it be white? And he's like, well, not necessarily. There are generics that can be blue or different colors. So that's such a great point. Just because it's not the right color doesn't mean it's the wrong medication. But again, just a reason to ask that question, check with the pharmacist, and you can even say, normally this pill is pink, why is it blue? Is this a generic? You're allowed to ask those questions.
It's unfortunate that there are enough errors, those 100,000 errors, and that's voluntarily reported, that actually we have to check our medication. If I do look at it, is there something I can do in terms of can I Google the number that's on there or the design that's on the pill?
Sure, and that's exactly what Miss Hector Faison's daughter did. If you type in Google, pink pill 404, a pill identifier website will pop up. There's a number of them, and it will tell you, what you're describing, and it will even show you a picture, so you can see, is that my drug? Yep, that matches it, and that's how they figured out that it was in fact Adderall.
In this particular victim's case, it was not taking the essentially pain medication, but taking an upper, a stimulant that's going to keep her not only with the pain, but also awake. That had to be excruciating for her.
Right, and it went on for over 10 days. She stopped taking the drug when her daughter-in-law told her it was Adderall. So luckily she only took, I think, 4 or 5 of the pills. But then having that runaround with CVS, going back and forth and trying to get the correct medication, she said it was really a nightmare. And I think, again, because these were both Schedule II drugs, they had to launch that investigation to figure out what happened. And it wasn't until we got involved that I think they started taking her seriously and taking the case seriously.
And this could have been, if it was a different medication, it could have been fatal. Some people have died because they've received the wrong medication.
Sure, if you are allergic to something, I'm allergic to penicillin. So if I was given penicillin, that would not be a good thing. And yeah, a lot of people have a number of ailments and a number of allergies. So yeah, in her case, she ended up, losing a couple nights' sleep and being in a lot of pain, which is really unfortunate. But it could have been a lot worse.
Pharmacists have a tough job. Everyone makes mistakes on the job. I do. When we make a mistake, often we've just misspelled someone's name on the news in the little lower third underneath their face. If a pharmacist makes a mistake, it can cause serious injury or death. Are you seeing that pharmacists are overworked? Is that part of the problem? And is that why there's been this proposed legislation to reduce or at least limit the number of prescriptions they can write in a single shift or fill?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is fair to say that pharmacists are overworked and overburdened. That UGA pharmacy professor said just that, and he is someone that, of course, is an advocate for pharmacists. I thought it was really interesting what he brought up, because when I'm at the pharmacy, I do see a lot of those techs behind the counter, and I always thought that they could do what pharmacists can do, but quite frankly, they can't. And especially with these Schedule II drugs, a pharmacist has to sign off on it. So if one pharmacist is getting all of these requests in, it's easier to understand how something like this could happen.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, if you do put a limit, what happens when, your grandmother goes in to get the prescription filled at the pharmacist that she always goes to, says, sorry, I've reached my limit for the day, you can't have your medication. It does create some problems. So it really comes down, it sounds like, to staffing, and that's a corporate decision if it's a large chain, or an individual business owner's decision if it's a mom and pop.
Sure, and the professor brought up a really good point too, to what you were saying there with the capping of the certain medications, 150 per shift. That a lot of times they get an influx in the morning, at lunch, and right before closing. So it's not so much that having a cap would make their lives easier. It's more just like spacing out, which isn't going to happen because people are going to go in at lunch and before they close.
Right.
So I thought that part was really interesting as well, and we weren't really able to include that tidbit in the story. But yeah, he also said, to your point, that a pharmacist isn't going to want to turn someone away. So he just doesn't think that's the magic answer, but he doesn't really know what is the magic answer.
And you pointed out that people come in during lunch or right after work, and I didn't think about it before. Some people don't have the flexibility. But with that said, if you can go in those off times, you would likely have a better chance of getting a more accurately filled prescription.
Oh, absolutely. And a better chance of talking to the pharmacist.
Good point.
Because they'll be more, they won't be as busy.
Right. And the other thing is, if you say 150 and that cap is too low, if a single pharmacist is overseeing 150 prescriptions, a failure, let me put it this way, an accuracy rate of greater than 99% could still result in a mix-up in a prescription once per day.
Right.
For that one pharmacist. And that's an extraordinary failure rate, even if they're 99.5% accurate.
Yeah, especially if you're that one person.
That's right. That's right. It all comes down to that one person. They have to be right every time, all the time. Anything else you think we ought to know, Rachel? Things we can do to keep an eye on this for ourselves and our families?
No, I think it's just, really being your own advocate, keeping a list of your medications, talking to your pharmacist, and like I said earlier, trying to go to that same pharmacy if you can, so that they have all your drugs on file and they can tell you if there's any interactions. And even having that relationship with the pharmacist is nice too.
Yeah, that's great. And if anyone at home has any tips for us and you would like us to investigate, we have the largest investigative team in Metro Atlanta, 11 people dedicated full-time to doing investigations. Send tips to investigates at Atlanta News First. And we'll see you on Atlanta News First and right back here on Atlanta News First Plus. This has been Behind the Investigation. For Rachel Polansky, I'm Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe.